Hello, hello, hello. This is Edgar Wright speaking.
And this is Simon Pegg, beginning one of our final commentaries on these films.
Yeah, this is the writer's commentary for the film The World's End. You already knew that because you bought it.
You idiots. So this is the opening track, which is Mark Summer's
Magic,
Magic,
which is a 1990 hit. This is we deliberately picked this because it was a hit in 1990.
A little curio, there was this odd trend for taking children's theme tunes and turning them into dance tracks, including Sesame Street and The Magic Roundabout, and this is that.
This is one of the first ones of those. Now, here we go.
It was June.
Now, the idea with this sequence is that, like, it's the prophecy of things to come. Like, this is the night in 1990, but there are lots of omens of things to come.
It's basically a roadmap for the entire film. The events of the night on which the film takes place are pretty much foreshadowed entirely in this.
For instance, right here.
Mark on his forehead that looked like a sick.
Oliver, like he says, Oliver was all mouth, and later in the movie, Martin Freeman is literally all mouth.
Literally all mouth.
Good for a laugh.
Here we see, there's young Shane Hawkins, the bully that you see later.
Steve was a pretty cool guy.
Young Stephen. Oh, it's worth pointing out as well that all of the names of the characters like medieval. They're supposed to be like the Knights of the Round Table.
Like a sort of monarchical hierarchy.
King, Chamberlain, Prince, Page.
We've already missed young Sam there, played by Flora, who looks remarkably like Rosamund, which is amazing. And all the moment of Gary subduing Stephen before he pursues
I told him
Sam.
I just wanted to have a good time. He thought
Pierce there?
funny.
Pierce, I deliberately shot Pierce out of focus because I didn't really, I mean, it was impossible to avoid Pierce Brosnan, but I didn't want people to
But he did that himself, didn't he? That's on his skill
He's very
set.
multi-talented. It's one of the things, it's amazing that he never actually utilised that in the Bond films, actually making himself out of focus.
It's a way to sneak up on people.
He's very much like the Predator in that way. We'll talk about the names of the pubs later, but they're all like tarot cards telling you what's going to happen.
Harbingers.
Before reaching our
There you go, The World's End. The World's End is actually a real name of a pub. There are many in the UK.
Hundreds.
There are like sort of a whole bunch in London.
We were off. We didn't waste
Me and Simon used to meet in the World's End. We used to go to the cinema on Odeon Camden Parkway, and we used to say, "I'll meet you in the World's End. I'll see you in the World's End."
I had my first date with my wife there, actually.
Nick fell off the wagon in the World's End.
You also see the initial knockdown ginger there of Gary knocking the doorbell. You see the marmalade sandwich for the first time sitting in the same position they are when you see them again in the Cross Hands. Oliver, in the movie, leaves the film in the trusty servant, even though we don't know he does.
Bumped into her again.
There's the Disableds, that lovely moment when beautiful lovemaking was happened between young people.
You can actually see Stephen in the background glowering in the back of that nightclub scene. Oh, here, this happens later, like Nick rips his cardigan open. You see young kind of like Andy there.
That shot's recreated when Gary runs across and kicks the sign over.
Everyone got power and Pete chucked away.
Young Pete leaves the crawl in the park and like later does exactly the same thing. You know, he basically dies at the park.
We had the boys with us the whole time during the shoot.
Blood on my knuckles,
Tom, Zach,
down my
Luke,
shirt, sick on my shoes,
James
seeing the orange
and
glow.
Zach.
Very good.
Sorry, and Jasp, sorry.
Not very good. Better.
I said Zach twice. Because they had to come in at the end of some scenes and do their little bit.
Now, who's that on the left there, Simon?
There's Nicola Cunningham, a.k.a. Bloody Mary, the very first zombie in Shaun of the Dead, and a dear friend of ours. It was great to have her back.
Yeah, we really wanted to have her, like, back in the movie.
She's one of my favourite ever zombies of all time, actually, Nicola. I'll never forget her edition, was amazing.
No.
Now, you see the colours here, Gary's in hospital in this sort of, kind of, I guess, a sort of institution of conformity, and the colours are a little similar to the blanks in a way, aren't they?
Yeah, the colours of the blanks are blue and green, so we thought it was, like, only right that in terms of that's the sort of the ranking kind of like colours for the blanks later. You notice that all of the blanks are wearing blue and green. So Gary has already been, it's kind of like some conforming, or that he's about to rebel.
He's been sort of inducted into a group there. Not that it's a bad one, although Gary seems to think it is.
Well, he's going to run away, you know. In a way, like we'll talk about a bit more about this later, but in a way the movie is about a man. A man runs away from help and triggers like his own intervention. First amongst his friends, and then on a cosmic a cosmic intervention, a galactic intervention. Now, this came up later, didn't it?
Yeah, these moments of Gary tooling up were not in the script.
Yeah.
We kind of had the idea during the shoot that we should punctuate when we see the grown-up guys for the first time with Gary sort of preparing for his mission, you know, suiting up like a superhero, you know. This is like his uniform, his costume for the Gary that is his most ebullient and effective.
Tell me the idea of like how you saw like his kind of like putting his Goth costume on again.
It's kind of like an American general who puts his uniform on before he shoots himself in the head. It's like Gary might not have been wearing this for the last 20 years, but he wears it for that night because it's like his mission clothes, you know.
Now, there's no symbolism to that big A other than this is an Audi showroom.
And we had to just make sure people knew that.
Thanks, Audi. And if you say, what's the significance of the big A? Audi.
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 No.
If we say Audi one more time, we get a free car.
I wish.
Audi.
How you doing, man?
All right, please.
Never better.
The effort it took to straighten Peter's hair, it's a Eddie's hair is a non-writing issue, it's just worth mentioning.
Have you had sex yet? We have 2 children.
Now, why did we do that? It was because of the younger kid, James?
Yes, and also, yes.
It's all right.
It was
In the
somewhere-
same way that there were little other elements of the younger actors that had to be modified, not least Luke's nose to match Martin's Schwanstucker.
Oh, yeah. Martin Freeman, as you'll see on the making of, was not completely cool about
The world's
his younger counterpart Luke wearing a prosthetic nose. And when he saw it, he goes, since when did I have a big nose? What am I, fucking Cyrano de Bergerac? Now, you are not normally this tall, Simon.
No, Thomas Law, who played the younger me, was about 1.5 inches taller than me, so I wore little lifts in my shoes to elevate me, which makes me slightly more imposing to Peter and Oliver.
I thought that after the accident. Not an issue.
It's interesting as well that the order that we wrote the persuasion sequence in is the order of susceptibility. So Peter is the easiest.
He's the pushover.
Stephen is surprisingly easy because Gary knows that the rivalry between them still exists. He knew that Andy had to be last, so that made Oliver third. And
also Oliver, he knows, like, Oliver is a lightweight, so he kind of, he sort of tries to kind of coax him that way by saying, oh, you might even make it to the end this time.
Yes, yes.
This entire row here, they'll all have dormer windows above the front elevation.
When you had your lifts in, Simon, to make you kind of over 6 foot.
Which makes me look like Frankenstein next to Martin in the Oliver scene.
I used to call you Frankenpeg.
You did.
Knock, knock.
We like the idea of Paddy Stephen being like a cool architect.
Yeah. He
He's
wears
like-
an open neck shirt.
Yeah, yeah.
His helmet's black.
It's sort of slightly based on our production designer Marcus Rowland, who's
got a
like always like looks super cool. Marcus Rowland is like the kind of the milk tray man of the production design world.
He is. He sneaks into your house dressed in black and makes it look like a different time period.
I'm kidding. I'd love to meet her sometime. No. Why are you here? Haven't you heard? We're getting the band back.
Funny enough, we did think actually, as well as a lot of personal experience coming into the movie, one of the things we talked about when we were writing is about like band rifts.
Yeah.
Like sort of, aside from a lot of the kind of the characters coming from our personal experience, like in terms of the idea of like, you know, the friends like splitting up, we talked about different bands, be it Pink Floyd or the Libertines.
Or the
like,
Beatles even, you know.
Yeah, you know, especially like bands where somebody had been let go. Libertines and Pink Floyd particularly, where like the lead singer has issues and they have to cut him off, you know?
Yeah.
So both Sid Barrett and Pete Doherty, who like had kind of drug problems, were kind of like
that's
essentially
very much
sacked
like
from
this.
their bands, you know?
It's about clothes.
Here we see Gary as well being, you know, it was always our intention that even though Gary is essentially a kind of, you know, an alcoholic, he's not unmotivated by any means. He's not. He's almost made smarter. It's like his superpower, the way he manipulates them all. Like he picks up the word lintel and he uses it against Andy.
If you're worried about me, don't be, all right?
I think also, like, even though
is back on the...
Gary is on a sort of a mission of self-destruction,
No, I mean, I'm back on the bike. What's bike?
even though he's like sort of like extremely deluded in what he's trying to do, like I do think he wants the friends back together. It's that when he actually gets them back together, even though he won't admit it to himself, they are not teenagers anymore.
No, absolutely. I think he's also conflicted in his motivations. You know, part of it is him, and part of it isn't. Part of it's his problems that's driving him. Part of him is his genuine desire to be with his friends. And I think at the end, when he's there with his friends and he's not drinking, it's proof that
You have my card.
you know there was a noble aspiration in there somewhere. You know?
Yeah.
Good to see you too, oh man.
That fuck off was not in the script. It was
How's your sister?
"Fuck me, run," wasn't it? And I said it on the day, and
Fuck
it
Off
made
was
us
just
laugh.
cleaner and funnier. That's right. It was Dr. Ink.
Yeah, you do. With Dr.
That was
That was a last-minute
late
joke.
addition to the script because I had
you.
been past a pub called Dr. Ink and I thought, oh, I got to use that.
That's
Dr.
good.
Ink.
I'll
drink.
have that.
I'll have that.
Now they're going to sue you.
Well, it was a pub that was near the BFI South Bank, and I went past it. Is that a Martin Freeman impersonation?
Yeah.
Now, you notice his Bluetooth that he has in his ear. Like, if you watch later on, once Martin Freeman turns into a blank, you'll notice that his Bluetooth is constantly blinking.
You have a friend here.
Beckingham, Davis, and Knightley. Beckingham is my birth name, my dad's name. I changed my name when my mum remarried, and Davis is Nick's mum's maiden name, and obviously Knightley is Andy's name. I tried so hard to knock over that picture of Andy's family with this. It wasn't even in shot in the end, but I thought it would be so funny if Gary went, knocked over a photograph of Andy's family with the elastic band.
Tell us a little bit about what you were wearing, Simon.
I'm basically wearing a sort of pretty much a goth uniform, albeit the Docs maybe were a little bit of a post-punk feel. He would have had slightly tighter jeans and winkle pickers if he'd been full goth, but he was his own man, he had his own look.
Would he have got winkle pickers from Boney Maroney in Bristol?
Correct.
That's where my brother used to buy brothel creepers.
I would have got them from Swank in Gloucester. He's wearing a Sisters of Mercy long sleeve, which was sanctioned entirely by Andrew Eldritch himself, the lead singer of the Sisters of Mercy and a personal hero of mine.
Why do you think none of us...
He's wearing a Vision Thing necklace and an unk, very gothy.
Oh, there's little things here, like where there's stuff in the screenplay.
Oh, the black hole.
The fact that he mentions black hole, like we wanted because of where the movie ends, and it sort of ends with a sort of a galactic kind of like a cataclysm, essentially.
No, Gary. Oh, God.
You know, there's lots of references to like sort of, you know, our universe, like a black hole. That Newton Haven is, you know.
And it sort of literally becomes a sinkhole in the end. It literally becomes
Is it a
Yeah.
the centre of a huge...
Techno Pompeii.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Techno Pompeii.
Techno Pompeii.
Good name for a club.
That I remember. There's your assistant Leo Thompson in the
It is.
background there, playing Felicity, who's named after a
Leonora Thompson, one of our finest young actresses.
with a great future behind her.
Great future behind her.
The character's named after a young woman who passed away sadly, whose father wrote to me, and so we wanted to sort of. She was a fan of ours, and we thought it would be nice to.
When?
Give her a mention and sort of let her live on in this film. So that's Felicity, played by our lovely Leonora Thompson.
I'm sorry.
I remember Bill Pope getting quite teary at this bit. I was so thrilled because he sort of came up to me and patted me on the back. But this is Gary at his most insidious. He's using the fake death of his mother.
I think the thing with Gary is like he almost like has Munchausen syndrome. Is like I think people who are such habitual liars actually start to believe their own lies. You do it so sincerely. It's like that you actually, you know what I mean in terms
I
of,
know. I mean, Paddy Considine tells a story of someone he worked with once who essentially, when Paddy had lost someone in his family, the person in question pretended that someone had gone in their family to sort of
make him feel better.
Not for making him feel better, but to be equally sympathetic to other people.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's not good.
There's The Sopranos.
Hi, mate. Didn't we decide to stop calling?
Martin will give you like sort of 2 line readings the same, and then every take after that will be something radically different, which is always fun to watch.
I love the way there's a real easy friendship between the other guys, you know.
Decide which of us is the biggest idiot for coming.
There isn't an awkwardness that Gary causes this awkwardness when he's around them. They sort of almost seamlessly fit back into their...
Maybe he had an accident.
Even there, in that little easy silence they're sitting in.
Yeah. There's that line that he says about Gary King's going to outlive us all. I remember we talked about rock stars who should probably be dead.
Yes.
Like
well,
Keith Richards or Shane
Iggy
McGowan.
Pop or Shane
Bob.
McGowan. Like these kind of indestructible guys.
Now,
Also,
people asked us about the Ampere in the background, is that I wanted like Newton Haven, I wanted the network to kind of like have brought...
I've started to branch out.
Yeah, start to branch out hybrids. The idea of hybrids kind of being everywhere. So we got kind of like the Vauxhall Ampera, which is a hybrid. So you see those adverts, and actually later in Newton Haven, the only cars in the town are all like
Amperas.
Amperas. But I thought it was funny that there's a big billboard for an Ampera hybrid whilst your gas-guzzling Ford Granada is like belching smoke. I thought it was quite funny.
It's also worth mentioning Oliver talking about following Gary King into almost certain oblivion, which is exactly what they do in a very literal sense. And the lines that, what are we doing here, you're telling me, mate, are repeated later on in the bathroom after the,
That's right,
the fight with the first set of blanks. I love this joke.
We're going to be late.
But that's also the idea that the clock is actually 4 o'clock because 4 tolls of the bell.
Yeah.
For the 4 o'clock because Gary said, oh, you know, I'll meet you at 3, and then it was like 3 for 4.
For whom the bell tolls. And also it's worth mentioning, and you know, it's necessary to say it for the conversation, but we actually wrote to the BBFC to ask them how many times we could say the word cunt in the film, which we have 1 in Shaun of the Dead, there's 2 in Hot Fuzz, 1 written, 1 said. And Edgar wrote a very nice letter just saying, and then we got a fabulous letter back telling us in very adult and plain terms.
Very polite.
Very polite and helpful exactly how many times we could say it. I think it was more than we actually did in the end. I think it was 5, it was said in a certain way.
I remember this.
There's something here.
And there are 5 cunts in that car, funnily enough.
This bit with the tape is something that actually happened to me. Me and my friend Ian were on the way down to a wedding, and we were driving, and my friend Ian was playing the song Get It Hot by AC/DC, and I said, oh, I haven't heard this in years. Didn't I put this on a tape for you? And he said, yeah, this is it. This is the tape. Now, in Ian's case, he was joking. He deliberately brought out this tape to play to me, to make me laugh, of this old compilation tape. And then he had the compilation tape in the car with my handwriting.
Wow.
To something I'd given him like
That's amazing.
Like 15 years before. But in Gary's case, Gary has never had that tape out of the stereo, correct?
Correct, and it causes a certain amount of, it's a very poignant moment in a way. It's very telling about Gary and about, you know, he's literally stuck in something. He's stuck in the past, just like that tape is stuck in the machine. It's there are funny moments in this film which actually have are underpinned by quite a deep sadness, and I like that.
What about Paddy's line there, like, it's easier though, less stress? That's kind of like setting up for the network.
Well, they all basically say they've been, oddly with the exception of Oliver, they all basically say that they've compromised their lifestyles in some way. You know, Pete still works for his dad. Andy's doing corporate law, not family law. Pete has literally sold his company to a larger sort of homogenizing force, and he's happier because it's less stressful. Oliver, interestingly, runs a boutique estate agency, which would kind of suggest that for the first person that is assimilated, he's actually holding out.
But he's, you know, he's the first to go. Well, you know, like, he is an estate agent, though.
What are you saying? There will be estate agents listening to this. Are you fucking bastard? What do you mean?
I like that with the Happy Mondays, that, like, I always wanted to use this song because...
That's so literal.
Well, it's like, call the cops,
I know.
You know, and then cut to Steve Oram on a bike.
Services.
Know why I pulled you over, sir?
Was the music too loud?
One thing we didn't actually say back there was your little thing about the setup of the Three Musketeers, a bit saying it would have been more exciting with 5 because 2 could have died and you still have 3 left, which is obviously exactly what happens, is that Martin Freeman and Eddie Marzan do not make it.
Exactly, and when also Eddie's correcting Gary that it's the 4 Musketeers, not the 5 Musketeers, which he does later on in the Bowls Club when we've lost one of us. So all that's prefiguring things that happen later on. Here's Steve Oram now from Sightseers as the traffic cop.
48 Bishop's Gardens.
I love everyone's reactions in this scene.
Isn't Bishop's Gardens like...
Bishop's Gardens where we shot
Shaun of the Dead?
Shaun of the Dead's... Philip and Barbara's house was Bishop's Gardens.
Yeah, Bishop's Gardens in East Finchley is like where...
Yes, it was. No, wasn't it the Bishop's Avenue that's near
Yeah, I
Hampstead?
think we had to
and then it goes... That's right.
We had to change it.
It was Abbott's Gardens.
Abbott's Gardens, that's right. We wrote Abbott's Gardens into the script and then we couldn't clear it, but we tried to name it after...
And the Bishop's Avenue is opposite Abbott's Gardens. So.
There you go. It's a mix.
Well, we're all from here. We're just back to...
This was a very fun scene to do. I love... The car was always... car stuff is always hard to shoot, I would imagine, and also tough to perform because it's quite cramped. But being in the car with those four guys was great fun.
Now, we should probably say a little bit about Newton Haven, like... You know, Newton Haven, like, literally means Newtown Heaven.
Yes.
Still registered to you.
There isn't a real town called Newton Haven, but there's lots of towns with similar names. Like,
Newton Abbot and Milford Haven and... Also, Gary says as they're looking at Newton Haven, they're about to paint it red, and if you fast forward to the closing moments of the film, that's exactly the colour that it is.
Indeed. We like to pack sort of like a lot of foreshadowing into this movie, so we don't want people to think sort of like that what
the hell is this?
like this is a classic bit of foreshadowing right here. We're about to get annihilated. When we were writing, I remember we wrote down all of the names for drunk, as many synonyms for drunk that we could come up with in slang terms.
And they were all negative
all destructive terms.
Yeah.
And so many of them like worked for like sci-fi kind of carnage. Like obliterated, annihilated, wasted, you know, they're all like sort of terms of destruction.
It's worth mentioning that that really was the Britain's first roundabout that we drove past then in Letchworth. We always designed Newton Haven in our minds to be a new city or a new town that had or an old town which had somehow been built onto, and that required the garden cities of sort of north of London, Welland and Letchworth, both of which sort of fitted the bill, really.
This map actually is an amalgamation of like Welland Garden City and Letchworth. We sort of like brought the two, like we tried to make the actual path of the kind of the crawl work. And parts of the movie, if you actually go to either of these towns, Welland Garden City or Letchworth, you can pretty much like see, you can pretty much walk around the same crawl. Now, of course, Mandy and Michael and Alison, some of our key blanks, they recur later. Look at, there's all the Amperas in the background. Yeah. All exactly the same color, and all blue and green. Oh, there's something else I should mention is the fact that you guys are always walking in the same formation. We used to call it Osgap.
Osgap,
Oliver, Stephen, Gary, Andy, Peter. And the reason that like Martin and Eddie are on the outside is because when they die, the central trio remains the same. The other thing worth pointing out, like I said, is all of the blanks are all wearing blue and green, including Martin and Eddie, because Martin and Eddie are going to become blanks, and at the end, when they're in the catacombs, they're already in the right colours. So, you know, see, we are thinking about colour palettes and all these kind of things.
We actually reversed Osgap when it came down to its smallest iteration, which was the three of them when they're facing up against the network. Nick and Paddy swapped sides, and I think it was because it was a harbinger of change within the group. They were sort of unifying, and things were different to how they were.
Until an enterprising business fellow decided that far from...
Twatted is a great drunk euphemism.
Better suited as a humble tap room, where a weary traveller might get swatted. Come on!
That is actually sort of based on some historical, like, text about...
Yeah, we looked it up. Every pub name in this film is real. Now, the first post is an obvious indication of what's going to happen here. It's the first stop on their journey of the evening, and as such, it is their first post. And we found a pub on the internet called The First Post, and its history was that it was a post office. Also, some first posts are to do with racing horses, but this fitted the bill for our pub number one.
If you actually see that shot where you see the first POV, you can see...
Come again? The guest ales.
The bartenders, like in all the pubs, are doing exactly the same choreography of cleaning their glass. So there's lots of things where people are doing the same thing in the same pubs. Also, you know, if you look through, you can see the numbers for every pub, like hidden. Some obvious, some pretty obvious, and some pretty subtle. But you know, in the 12 pubs, you can see the number.
If
you know, behind Teddy Kempner's head here, you can see like the number 1 very obviously.
When you look at the signs in the pub, the chalk drawings, the menus, that kind of stuff, that's very indicative of this sort of homogenization of old pubs. They try and recreate this folksy writing when it's really all made in factories, which is another harbinger of the network and what's happening to the town.
If you look in all of the pubs, the signage is identical. Like there's the same menu in every pub, just with the name of the pub is changed. Like where I live in London, like around, you know, my house, I have about 10 pubs. 80% of them are identical. Which means that there's almost pointless doing a pub crawl. Is why would you go through 12 pubs if they all are the same?
Yeah.
Now here's an important harbinger of something that's going to happen later, talking about being teetotal.
And I'm less of a man because I choose to drink water. Well, it's a bit all-ducky, isn't it?
All-ducky.
Very PC, Gary. Get out of the 90s, Pete.
That was a late addition, that was.
That makes me laugh.
So explain this bit, Simon.
Well, here's Nick explaining, basically outlining what we see Gary do at the very end of the movie, which is walk into a pub full of big ugly bastards wearing war paint and order 5 waters.
You said it, Paul.
Which is a measure of where Gary is at that point. He's evolved, you know, which is key.
And God forbid you ever...
Now, all this stuff was so much fun to write in terms of the banter among the five of us, because Edgar and I always had a pretty solid idea of who we wanted to play the parts, so we were able to tailor the dialogue and the attitudes to the actors. And
we even took a leaf out of Tom Lennon and Ben Garant's screenwriting book, and one trick that they do is writing the actor's name in the final draft document. So the first draft of the script, before we handed it in, the working draft had Simon Pegg, Martin Freeman, Nick Frost, Paddy Considine, Eddie Marzan actually written instead of the character names.
Yeah.
Now, this thing about Let's Boo Boo, this is actually something that me and my friends used to do, because Mr. Wilde, who's my drama teacher from
Star of
school,
Hot Fuzz.
who's in Hot Fuzz, who Pierce Brosnan is essentially playing later, he had that Shakespeare quote, "Exit pursued by bear," on the wall, and me and my friend used to literally... Me and my friend Graham Lowe, who plays the living statue in Hot Fuzz, used to say, "Exit pursued by Yogi Bear," which then later turned into Let's Yogi and Boo Boo.
But did it? I mean, didn't we evolve it into Let's Boo Boo from your Yogi Bear thing?
Yeah, I think so.
you're confusing
I get confusing fact and fiction. We definitely used to say "Exit pursued by Yogi Bear," for real.
Here's the exact same camera moves in the Old Familiar, which is, of course, the Pear Tree, the same pub that we used for the first post.
Yeah.
And the Old Familiar, another obvious... indication of what's happening here is that it's exactly the same. It is very familiar.
Well, an amazing thing here that is a total coincidence, this seems like a bit of casting genius, but it was a complete coincidence, is Publican #1 and #2 are cousins. Teddy Kempner and Mark Kempner. They're cousins in real life.
No way.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't even know
Teddy
that.
and Mark are cousins, and they hadn't actually, they met at the audition, they hadn't seen each other for years.
That's hilarious.
And they're cousins, but like that is a complete coincidence.
Now, we cut a line out here just because you do sometimes, for timing and rhythm, and when Gary's describing what a funeral was like, which always made me laugh, but it just didn't quite get the same laugh as the first part of the joke, so we excised it in a sort of pace edit. But it was about, Gary said there were a lot of hats. It was like a wedding where someone was dead.
Yes. A lot of people wearing black, a lot of hats.
It was like a wedding where someone was dead.
Here you see like Martin's Bluetooth like bleeping for the first time, but if you watch later on, his Bluetooth is always bleeping after he's turned into a blank, and bleeping blue,
Because he's being fed information the whole time.
Yeah, you'll see that later on. It's very funny just to watch Martin, the point where he's like changed into one of the blanks.
It was Sam.
Sam's here!
Is there a fucking echo in here? Yes, Sam's here.
Martin is so great in this bit.
Mum's tomorrow.
What, she's coming here?
Now, wasn't the cabaret thing based on something?
No, I think
Did you
we
ever do
wanted
cabaret
to...
at school?
No, we didn't, but it was, I think...
Selective memory, don't you?
Looking at it, it came from the fishnet stockings thing, but then we were able to reincorporate it when Sam arrives and Gary quotes the line from the song Cabaret, Willkommen, Bienvenue, Welcome, which is a little dig at Stephen, and I think is a very funny joke, because he's obviously...
Credit to Canderab.
Yeah, credit to, yeah. Fantastic musical.
Now, the word wide-ons, I'm not sure. I think wide-ons, correct me if I'm wrong, people out there, I think it might be Australian slang. Is that right?
I had such a wide-on for him.
Oh, mate, I had such a wide-on for that guy. So
I don't
hot.
even know if that's true. I mean, maybe you can answer that one day, girls, in this... Oh, don't even go there.
Hey, Australian girls, can you tell us whether you came up with the phrase wide-on or whether it is an English phrase?
And does your aperture increase?
Oh, my God. Stop.
In the face of... I'm sorry.
Aperture.
I couldn't think of a better way to say it.
Sam, would you like a drink?
Credit to Joel Grey.
I do look a bit like Joel Grey in this, funnily enough. That's not meant to be. I look like I've got a trouser button.
You look like Joel Grey in Remo, The Adventure Begins.
Remo. Oh, my God. What about Rio? Wasn't there Remo Unarmed and Dangerous as well?
It had 2 different titles, I think. Now...
Here we go with Rosamund Pike, the most beautiful actress alive.
Now, Rosamund is essentially playing somebody from my... I went out with my friend's sister, and then later my other friend went out with my friend's sister, creating a... Not a love triangle, but an awkward square.
Down the toilet. I mean, we don't know what...
But there's absolutely like that. This is where Rosamund's character came from. And when I told Rosamund, she said, "Is this based on anybody you know?" I said, "Yeah, it's sort of based on my ex-girlfriend." And she said, "Are you still in touch with her?" And I said, "Yeah, on Facebook." She goes, "Maybe I could meet her." So then I had the amazing experience of getting in touch with my girlfriend. Let's point out, a girl I went out with in 1993. And I texted her and said, oh no, maybe even 1992. Crazy. And said, oh, Rosamund Pike wants to meet you. And I basically lied and didn't say, like, she's playing you. I said, we need to speak to somebody who has a very responsible job. And my ex-girlfriend now works as a compliance officer in a pharmaceuticals company. So Rosamund Pike drove to Maidenhead to meet my ex-girlfriend.
Wasn't she a bit suspicious? You know, like one of your best friends is the head of a production company and has a very serious job. She could have just spoken to Naira.
True, true, true.
It's interesting to point out that Sam is one of the first people to see into Gary's soul in that toilet sequence where she says what happened, and you see Gary take that hit. He panics slightly that she's seen into him.
Well, you see a thing throughout the movie that, like, your character only starts to kind of unravel or even be honest with himself or others when it's just one-on-one.
Yeah.
Like, you and Sam together, you looking in the mirror, like, you talking to, like, Sam at the car and you talking to Nick at the end. When there are more than, like, when there's more than one person there, you've got your armor back on and you're full of bluster.
It's almost easier for Gary to take on more than one person at once, which is what he does in the fights and with the twins in the past.
That's right. Basil!
The old familiar is obvious, but the famous...
There's Elder Frey looking guilty about the Red Wedding.
Spoiler alert. The famous cock is obviously Gary. Gary is the famous cock because he's been barred and he's on the sort of the wall of shame.
And he is undoubtedly an absolute cock.
Otherwise the whole thing's fucked.
I'd say it was fairly fucked already.
Basil was named after a guy that used to be in the pubs in my hometown. It was like a sort of a town drunk who used to have wild conspiracy theories. His name was Basil, so that's where that name came from.
There's no coincidence here in the fact that the track Fool's Gold is playing, which is essentially what lager is.
Well, especially somebody else's lager.
Somebody else's lager, and obviously the Stone Roses have played a certain role in our filmmaking history in terms of our mentioning them in Shaun of the Dead, and we thought it was only right they come back now since we were dealing with the time period at which they first emerged.
Nick's line there about, like, going organic is a setup for, like, the epilogue when he becomes a hunter-gatherer and fully goes organic.
Now there's the boys, who we will very shortly see in action. Well, they're playing pool with blue and yellow balls as well, which is interesting.
Yeah.
As opposed to red.
The other thing is that, like, you can see Gary there, like, is looking at the teens because he'd rather be with them than these, like, old fuckers, as he puts it. Now, wasn't the thing about falling asleep on the pool table?
That was Nick. Nick did that. He fell asleep at a pub in Camden called the Stag's Head. I think he slept for about 8 hours on the pool table, and when he woke up, everybody knew who he was, and it really freaked him out.
Was it on New Year's Eve?
I don't think it was on New Year's Eve, but...
Well, it was.
The thing, he woke up and it was like everybody knew him, because everyone that had come into the pub in the last 8 hours had asked who it was, and they, oh, it's Nick. So that whole idea of him waking up and freaking out. There's the marmalade sandwich. That's not Rose, Sam, and Sophie. That's some older actresses.
Older actresses, yeah.
Portraying them.
Actresses of the correct age.
Yes.
Later, they're replaced by their sort of 18-year-old counterparts.
We haven't changed that much. I mean,
Becky Salt is the name of a girl from, like, school that my friend used to fancy. He was, like, totally in love with her, and so it kind of lodged in my head as the name for a hot girl.
Becky Salt is a perfect old school fanciable girl's name.
Yeah.
It sounds to me as archaic as...
She sounds sexy. It's
Bessie
like,
Winchester or something.
Becky Salt. It's just such a memorable name.
Yeah.
Here's Darren Boyd playing Shane Hawkins. Now, both of us have, like, a bullying incident in our life that inspired this.
Yeah, the whole thing of dislodging the eyeball came from a story from my school days, and a bully who kind of made my life slightly miserable in the corridors for about a year of my school life.
All bullies are called Shane as well.
They're all called Shane. Shane Hawkins. We like the idea of the bird of prey. He's a Hawkins.
Shane Hawkins.
But you had the same thing.
I had the same thing where one of the things that inspired the movie is when I used to go back to my hometown and feel kind of like completely alienated that, like, just nobody recognized me anymore. I used to go to the pub a lot when I was a kid. But then when I went back after kind of college and coming back from London, publicans wouldn't recognize me, people from school would recognize me, and very, like, sort of memorably for me, a bully from school, like, completely blanked me, pun intended. And I was never sure whether he, like, didn't remember who I was or didn't care, but somehow I was annoyed by the fact that he didn't recognize me.
Yeah, and I had a similar thing, which I think was certainly my inspiration for the all meant nothing moment in that speech, is that I similarly came into contact with a boy who hated me at school, who was very sort of like dismissive of me, and saw me in a pub like it was after a play we'd been in together, and he was like, "All right, remember those times? Like we'd all like it had meant nothing. Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Like it was a game.
Like it was a game.
Yeah.
And I felt like, well, no, it wasn't a game. You made me pretty miserable. Well, why am I going to laugh and smile with you?
You don't need us.
I've had a few people in my life who I would call shot Nazis. It's like, you were doing a shot right now. No, I don't really want a shot. Shots now.
Tell him who it is.
one of them. God bless him. He's one of my great friends. Chris Evans, aka Captain America, is the kind of guy. He once came into my birthday party. He came to my birthday party, and he came straight in, and I'd already had quite a lot to drink. And Chris Evans just came in straight. He goes, right, shots now. He goes, you were doing a shot right now.
How ironic.
Really, he said, we are doing a shot right now. Shots coming. Okay, you're having a shot right now. Like that.
Captain America did all that effort fighting the Nazis, and he ends up being one himself. Got to do with shots.
Chris, we love you. Now, on a less
Gary quoting the Soup Dragons.
To do what I want any old time.
Oh, this is an important line.
What you want?
The thing about slaves. The fact that Gary calls them slaves is important. I mean, essentially, this scene is supposed to be like Gary has triggered an intervention. Like, they are now rounding on him and telling him some hard truths that he can't really take. But his reaction to that is to say, you're all slaves and I'm free to do what I want any old time.
Which he kind of is, you know, he's out of the, in a weird way, he's out of the mainstream, he's on the fringes, he's not part of the collective, and in that respect, he is kind of free. It's not a great kind of freedom, though.
He's going to meet some real robots in a second. I was going to say the other person who was the shots Nazi was the usher at Nick's wedding, who
Danny.
Insisted that I had shots as soon as I walked into a room. I said, I've just got off a plane.
Yeah,
no,
that's
shots
right.
now.
Yeah.
You see Thomas, young Gary, punching this wall in the prologue.
Yes. You see you see that damage being inflicted in the prologue.
Greg here wearing blue and green. He's one of the blanks.
I think this is very reminiscent of the scene in Spaced when Tim has the conversation with the younger kid at the urinals. And this is something that's always kind of fascinated us, this idea of
there's always someone
younger than you, and always someone you're kind of trying to be in with. Even if you're kind of relatively young, there's always a younger person. And in the same way that Gary has this stilted conversation with what we learned to be a blank, Tim has the same sort of odd miscommunication with a kid who's younger than him, who ends up being an enemy and a combatant.
The difference, though, is that in this scene is that Gary wants to be with the teens.
Yes.
And like he actually sort of says,
Doing the Golden Mile.
I want to come with you. Where are you guys going next? Which I think is one of his many rock bottom like moments, is that Gary is like sort of a 40-year-old man is asking like a teenager, can I come and hang out with you?
Yeah, he doesn't have any qualms about sinking lower than low, Gary.
But that's also a setup for the very end as well.
Oh, don't walk.
He's going to hang out with his teenage
Absolutely,
friends.
yeah. It's kind of, you know, that's what he really, really craves is...
Oh, here we go. It's about to go
company.
off. You hear straight away, you can hear that mobile interference GSM noise, which is like the cell phones make that horrific sort of noise. It's supposed to be the sound of the network immediately, hearing that static.
Now,
Here we go.
ironically, is what's called a rock bottom. That's a move perfected by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who we absolutely love, and also a term used in addiction speak. How ironic.
Oh, there you go. I hadn't thought of that at all. The thing that, one of the ideas with the blanks is I really like the idea of them being, well, obviously being androids, but I wanted them to feel like action figures. The whole idea with like the blanks, their arms popping off, is they're like, you know, action men or Star Wars figures where you could take the arms and the legs off. So in a way, the whole movie, like, it's, you know, there's a big element of nostalgia in terms of Gary wants to be 18 again, but then from this point on, there are lots of signifiers, even in the sci-fi stuff, that are about like being young, like they're playing with these action figures and fighting them. But also even the blue came along for a couple of reasons, is that we had like the idea of blue blood is like a class thing. But also when I was at school, I used to get ink all over my hands. At the end of every school day, I would always end up with fountain pen ink all over my hands, and then usually my face and tongue. And so it's a way of making these actors look like little kids again. It's like regressing them, yeah?
Absolutely, and I love that sort of the imagery, the sort of the signs of childhood sort of creeping in to depict their regression. Now, Edgar, when we write these action sequences, I often hand over to you to write the action beats, just because, you know, obviously there's a visual element to it. When you get together with Brad, how much of it is in the script? I mean, I can remember, but just explain what you take to Brad and how you devise the fight.
Well, you'll see actually, you know, like sort of the storyboards are elsewhere. Like you can see kind of exactly like what's in the storyboards. I remember though the stage direction that was at the start of the sequence said, "The following fight is fast, brutal, and insane."
That's
I remember
right.
it said that in the. I mean, what we really wanted to do that was in the script and in the storyboards is the idea of like going around the room and following each character. So
Yes.
a lot of this was in the script. The whole thing of like one of them being in the cubicle. So the basic beats are there, but then what Brad, Alan, the choreographer, and Damien also, the other choreographer, did is start to kind of like expand on it. So I would say sort of for every like fight beat that I wrote or drew, they add like another 4.
Yeah, they're so inventive, and,
Yeah.
and I love the way these. One of the key things in action cinema sometimes is you have to forego character in order to facilitate the action, because stunt performers come in and take over, and they're not actors. They're there to do the physical stuff, and so you almost replace character with action. Whereas if the actors do the action, you can maintain character through the fight, and the fight feels more realistic and alive. And I think that's what Edgar, Brad, Damien were going for in this, and I really think they get it.
I think that one of the things that we had to do in like even way before like the choreographers came in, is that we had to do storyboards for the whole thing to actually get the budget right for the special effects.
Yeah.
So we knew exactly like this blank's going to get chopped in half. This blank has his head smashed off.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the arm like sort of being pulled off. So you have to kind of go through that and essentially make a shopping list of like, you know, even just to get this film made, the very first thing that we did was storyboard all of the scenes with special effects.
It's worth mentioning as well, the WTF joke was one you had, and you wanted to tweet, and you saved it, didn't
right.
you?
I was going to tweet, what the fuck does WTF mean? And I then stopped myself and said,
That's too good.
I might, don't burn it on Twitter. Like, keep that joke, use it in the movie.
What are you calling your wife? Because she's my wife.
You see, actually, when with that shot when Eddie comes out of the toilet, they're still in Osgap, Oliver, Stephen, Gary, Andy, Peter.
It wasn't written in the script that I spit on the corpse of the blank that I killed. It was just something that happened in the moment. It was a very, very fun fight to create and shoot. You know, a level of... go ahead.
I was going to say, worth pointing out, that's Bill Nye's, like, voice.
Oh, yes. Whenever you hear a voice on the phone, it's Bill Nye.
And also that, like, you know, one of the setups is, like, a foreshadowing of later is that when they can't get through, like Nick says, it must be the network. Which, of course, it is the network, because the network are the baddies.
And you can see how excited Gary is here, because he's relieved that there was a reason why they didn't feel at home in their own town. He's happier that it's because of dismantleable aliens than it is that he's an old, you know, alcoholic and nobody recognizes him.
In a similar way for us, I think, so one of the reasons people ask why alien invasion, I say, oh, much like Gary, it's like a coping mechanism. Is like, we'd rather leap to some fantastical, sinister conclusion than accept that maybe we're getting old, like sort of, and that our hometown wasn't all it was cracked out to be in the first place.
You see, what's happening here is totally choreographed. You see the way people are drinking. If you watch this without the film soundtrack, you'd hear Litzer Bixler, our choreographer, counting everyone's drinks.
5, 6, 7, 8, and 1.
Every time you see a barman, he does
5,
the same
6,
thing.
7, 8.
He throws his towel over his shoulder, and you know, there's this weird uniformity in the town that's just a sort of ambient creepiness, which you'll spot if you watch the film several times, which you should do if you've bought this DVD.
There's we should point out why this pub is called the Cross Hands, because of the fight.
It is the first place where they cross hands. The Cross Hands was a pub in Brockworth in Gloucestershire, where I grew up.
I don't want to put any more points on Pete's license.
It represents the first combat in the film. Although in the pub sign, the tarot card of the pub sign, 5 hands all sort of linked together, which also suggests the first time the 5 of them have ever really been a unit, which they come together to defeat
fight
the blanks.
Yeah. And also come together as a unit here that they're making a plan.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the Cross Hands was a place that you went to.
Yeah.
The famous cock, the number 3, is around the corner from my house in London.
In Islington, and they named it after you, didn't they?
Well, it's quite big.
Oh, help us.
Oh, I'm not even halfway.
You were the one who said aperture earlier.
Don't blame it all on me. There's an interesting thing here in that the pub crawl was essentially over before Gary went into the toilets, and now that this has happened, they've all turned to Gary in some respect because they've got no other recourse, and he uses it as an excuse to power forward with the pub crawl.
I know sometimes people say, why didn't they just leave? And they think, well, then the film would be over.
Yeah.
But it's also that thing of like...
He dupes them into staying.
Alcoholics are very organised, and Gary has a plan immediately. He figures out how to turn this to his advantage.
There is a thing in addictive behaviour where people kind of assume addicts are sort of slovenly, but they're very organised minds in terms of how they get their next, fix of whatever it is that's driving them, and often go to huge lengths and huge deceptions to achieve it, and that takes a lot of smarts and organisation.
Have you noticed at the start of that Doors track, have you noticed the sound effects that are happening in the pub?
No.
There's 3 door creaks.
Is there?
The Doors.
If you're a bit of chocolate, you'd eat yourself, wouldn't you?
I know. Well, that came up later. We just thought it was a funny thing. Is like, sort of, let's put some door creaks on there because it's the Doors.
We reshot this. Oh, look, there's the good companions, and you see Gary is the middle face, and the other 4 are the slightly, the followers, the slightly less happy followers. Gary is in his element now.
4 sad faces and 1 happy face. Now, this song, we always, right from the start, wanted to use this song. Written by Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, this song, Alabama song, a.k.a. Whiskey Bar.
Garth Jennings just there, another 3 for 3 member of the Cornetto family.
Yeah, the director Garth Jennings is in Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and also this. He was there on the left.
He directed Martin in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and The Great Son of Rambo.
Now, we actually had the Doors playing in your ears on that sequence.
Yeah, we had grommets in. Look, you can see the blanks that we've seen before here. There's the couple, there's Mandy with the baby.
Michael and Alison on the left. Gabriel, who's like one of the main blanks.
We're just 5 friends.
It's like they're on repeat, they're just on they're on a loop and they just walk around the town.
I like in being able to, in a script, being able to explain like sort of phrases like the phrase Dutch courage. Like we look it up and then we'd actually explain it.
Yeah. Here's the trusty servant. When you look at the sign of the trusty servant, you'll see that it's actually Michael Smiley, who, in this instance, is a human who's collaborating with the network, who's decided to go along with it so that he doesn't get replaced.
Now, this is the last time that Martin Freeman is human in the movie. There he goes, and he never is seen as a human again. When he comes back, you notice that he is not only is a blank, but he's had a complete hair. His hair is perfect, his costume is perfect, all the blue gloop is gone from his face. And
he used to make us laugh too. When he'd come out of the toilet and do all these little signifiers that he was sort of like getting used to his new face and stuff, but he would overdo it because he was making us laugh. He's a little git, Martin, sometimes.
What was funny as well, we had the thing that I said to Martin that like when he comes back as a blank, I said, because he'd already played Ian Holm in The Hobbit, and I said, this should be your second home, because now you're doing Ash from Alien. Second home. It's a pun.
I get it.
Is the Reverend Green? And if it is, I can ask him what's going on. And possibly buy some drugs.
Where did we come up with the Reverend Green?
I think just because he was oddly enough, he was a grass dealer, but Nick pointed out there wasn't much grass available in the 90s. It was all hash, but we kept it anyway. It was a good nickname.
like a Cluedo character.
Yeah, it was. It is a Cluedo character.
Oh, Reverend Green.
The Reverend Green.
Oh, well, there you go. I knew it was from somewhere.
So that's what. And this scene is, if you go back to the prologue, you see this scene exactly the same, but Michael is dressed in his sort of like acid house gear, and Gary is obviously exactly the same.
Right behind them on the right, you saw that sign that says drugs will not be tolerated in this pub.
And also there's a poster for the school disco in The Mermaid behind
which features blanks.
Yeah, which has blanks with glowing eyes.
Yeah, if you look at the school disco poster, you can see kind of like the glowing-eyed blanks.
Been taken over by robots full of blue stuff.
Now this was something that was like, when we first started thinking of the idea for the blanks,
What robot means?
we, looked up the word robot, and, robot means...
Robotnik, and from the Czech word, yes. We also, I think the way that the blanks evolved, looking back, was we really wanted a way to have Gary wind up with his teenage friends, and the only way we could figure it out at first was
young
time
replicants,
travel, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
So then, because we didn't want to do time travel because it's too fraught with, plot difficulties, we had to figure out a way to find younger versions, and that's how the network, that's how the blanks evolved. These kind of like replicatable, whatever age you want to be kind of thing.
Yeah, and it seemed to sort of work a lot better. Like when we had this time travel idea for the third act, it was just too unwieldy, too much legwork, and it
too convenient as well.
It's always just started to feel like turning into Back to the Future 2 at the end of the movie. I thought that phone was going off in the room. It was so loud.
I was going to switch it off, Edgar.
But I was going to say about the
great voice. Mike
Oh,
Sarn.
yeah. This is Mike Sarn, the director of Myra Breckenridge and the singer of Come Outside with Wendy Richards. This is Bill Nye's voice on the phone.
On the blue phone.
And this is where Michael becomes the trusty servant.
I understand.
Here he's realizing that he's going to have to be replaced. It's not a death entirely, because he's going to get to keep his memories, but it's something that he's going to have to go along with.
Wasn't it Nick's idea for him to down his shot?
Yes, I think it probably was.
Or down his whiskey,
it's
rather.
His last ever drink.
Yeah, it's like, we always thought this is his, like, walking the Green Mile. It's like he's going to his death. He knows he's going to die. You can hear the hand dryer there. Now, the reason that they put the hand dryer on is to sort of mask the sounds of the struggle.
Now, I realised that we created and we should always hold our hands up when we've inadvertently made a plot hole. But
wait, what?
why would they need to cover the noise if everyone else in the town was blank as well?
Well, not all of them are. You know, there
Yeah,
are
but-
some humans in there, like
yeah, but only
Marcus
those
Marnie.
two.
I know. Well, we don't know. There might be the odd human in the cross hands. But, you know, the other person that's a plot hole that's like somebody who seems human that I think is maybe the last person to be changed is the irate man whose doorbell gets rung. He seems kind of like sort of too angry to be a blank.
Right.
So I would say he's human, and by the kind of the final scene, he's become a blank as well.
Also, I guess they never know what tourists are coming into town. They never know what who's going to come into the pub. There always people from the outside could come in. That solves that.
Yeah.
So, no, we are great.
Hey, plot hole solved, everybody. Don't worry. Please don't take this Blu-ray back. It's all fine.
Mark Heap, we should say, I know this is a writer's commentary, but we've always written roles for Mark Heap in our films, and Sean and Fuzz, both he wasn't unable to do. Sean, because we actually cut the scene out. A tough one to do, but we did. It didn't really serve the...
You remember in Shaun of the Dead, the scene that we wrote for Mark Heap was basically reprising his cowardly policeman.
In Big Train, yeah.
Big Train. In Hot Fuzz, we wrote a part for him, and he hurt his back and was out of it. I should point out that, like, in that previous scene, you see the graffiti of the network on the wall.
I see that, the sprayed.
The two-headed dog?
The two-headed dog is obviously the twins, and Kelly and Stacey, who are our amazing twins, two dancers who we trained up as stunt performers and actresses who performed both roles, you know, more than adequately, in fact, brilliantly, are the two-headed dog. And they didn't quite get it until they were looking in the... I remember one night they were going, wait a minute, the two-headed dog? They were kind of slightly offended.
Listen, they're very beautiful ladies, so I apologise.
And they, you know, they are so... in sync. It's incredible. They genuinely have that connection that twins have. I remember when I was in the photo booth with them at the rap party, they both kissed me on the cheek at exactly the same time, and I was both frightened and aroused.
What's funny is I have twins in everything that I've done. Spaced, Sean, Fuzz, Don't, Scott Pilgrim, and this. And somebody said, what's your obsession with twins? And I said...
You want to have sex with them?
No, I said, I just love symmetry.
Oh, it's a nice way of saying you want to have sex
Also,
with them.
there is never a bad shot with identical twins. It's always, like, fascinating to me. So I think I am obsessed with identical twins.
Also, thematically, it has relevance in terms of the kind of, you know, of doubling, of things reoccurring. You see that in the scene, in this scene coming up with Sam and Gary. And
yeah. The reason there's a mirror behind was because, you know, they're talking about twins, and then their doubles in the background.
There's four of them.
Yeah.
And also there's this fear that everyone has a double walking around somewhere or maybe replaced. That's a great shot, very simply done. There was a camera in the wall and we rubbed it out, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's been digitally erased.
You can't even see a sign of it, though. It's beautifully
That's
done.
my tribute to, like that's what I call a De Palma-style shot. I don't think it has ever... I think there's maybe a shot weirdly in, like, Bonfire of the Vanities where there was, like, I think he did it with a two-way mirror. And I remember asking Bill Pope, sort of like, said, can't you do it with a two-way mirror? And then it was like, no, just drill a hole, put the camera through, and, like, we'll rub it out.
It was locked off anyway, wasn't it? So it wasn't like it was
No, it's
particularly
handheld.
difficult. Oh, it was handheld?
Yeah.
Wow. That's the amazing thing as well, that we were able to make use of the fact that, and maybe perhaps later in the writing process, but adapt our action because special effects technology has evolved so much, even since Hot Fuzz, you know.
He said that...
Beer gardens. I always remember, like, sort of, like, this was very vivid as... Oh!
It's fine. I thought I spilled my coffee, listeners. It's okay.
It's
Relax.
okay. Guys, don't take the DVD back. It's okay.
There's no coffee on it.
It was always, like, remember, like, sort of just kind of having sort of, like, private conversations in beer gardens at pubs.
Now that is Greg Townley, who I throw up there. That's not Kelly or Stacey. That's one of the few things that they didn't do. That is Kelly or Stacey.
Here we go.
That's an interesting harbinger as well, because I think Kelly got a black eye. didn't she, during the fight? There's a harbinger of that. We actually foreshadowed her black eye without realizing it.
One of the other things about the blanks, apart from action figures, is I really want them to be like hollow, the heads to be hollow. Like I used to say to, like, when I was explaining to people, I said, like an Easter egg. I said, imagine punching an Easter egg. You put your fist right through it. There's a couple of things with the blanks. One of them, I'll mention the other one later, but one of them is like, something from a poster that's not in the movie that I always thought was a great image. If you look at the poster for the original Stepford Wives, there's this great shot of Catherine Ross's head, like half smashed on the floor like a Christmas bauble.
Oh, really?
That image does not actually feature in the movie at all.
Wow.
But it's just something that I thought, that's a great image, like this half smashed head.
Yeah.
Like it's made out of glass and completely hollow.
Well, we like the
it's
idea
like a
that
Christmas ornament.
the blanks don't run like humans. They're not like, the neural center isn't in the head. It's probably somewhere in the middle of the body, and the rest of them is sort of hollow, so that there's nothing kind of in them. There's no wires or anything like that. We don't know how they run. It's a technology that's beyond us.
Well, funny enough, talking about that, originally, like when the twin bot, as we call it, coming up, was originally had 4 arms, and then my brother, who did the concept art with me, says, I don't like the 4 arms thing, because why would they have sockets at their waist? It makes no sense. So then we changed it to then like an arm and a leg, and then we changed it to 2 legs.
And I think Stacey did a lot of the leg work, if you'll pardon the pun, and was such a trooper because she had to wear those legs on her arms for hours and hours. She couldn't scratch her bum or eat a sandwich or anything. So I offered to scratch her bum.
And eat a sandwich for her?
And eat a sandwich for her. She denied one of those requests.
Yeah, this is a combination of prosthetic and digital. I mean, some of it's real, like, you know.
That block was not real. That was a digital
That's like
leg.
a magic block, yeah.
But the rest of it's all real. I love this fight.
Yeah. This is Brad Allen's favourite action scene in the film, actually.
Woof. That's my best martial arts ever.
This bit feels like, in a good way, it's funny, Bill Pope, actually, the DP shot Army of Darkness, and this always feels to me like a bit of an Army of Darkness type fight, in a good way.
The line...
This is Paddy's line, right?
Get your feet off her. Yeah, I think Paddy came up with that line.
Get your feet off her. Now, I wonder if ever anybody hears this line like an aspirin bottle, like...
Well, did you remember we had a very, very arcane moment of foreshadowing in...
We cut out eventually.
We cut out, which was Gary popping an aspirin bottle head off in the office of Andy Knightley. Smashing Eggman. That was a late... oh, no, that wasn't, actually. That was in the... That was in
we
the script.
wrote it into the script, but it came
During
up in rehearsal. Yeah,
That's right, yeah.
I think you and Nick came up with that. Oh, we were thinking of different names, and I seem to remember that you guys came up with that together.
Smashy Eggman.
And Nick gets 2 of the biggest laughs in the whole film in quick succession. Smashy Eggman, and then this bit comes...
I wanted to be the funny one in this film.
You are the funny one. It's just then, like, Nick completely steals it with, like...
This does get a massive woof.
It gets a woof.
A lot of people asked us if that was, like, impromptu, like Nick really did smash the window, which,
like, no.
which would have severed the artery in his wrist.
It's always a strange thing when people say, how much of it is improvised? None of it.
No.
Oh, the mermaid?
The mermaid, obviously, on the sign there, you see the marmalade sandwich, you see Sophie in the middle with her glorious red hair, and then Rose and Sam, or rather, Becky, Erica, and Tracy.
2 blondes and a redhead in the middle.
And a redhead. This is actually a very beautiful cinema in Letchworth. This isn't. This is an interior somewhere else, but the exterior...
Ciao, Fonsa Giles.
Was a cinema in Letchworth which I think screened this film and all 3 films in it. It was a massive event in Letchworth, obviously because there's so much of the film in Letchworth. It must have been lovely, great fun to watch the film in The Mermaid,
We did a special introduction.
The cinema's called, by the way...
The Broadway Cinema.
The Broadway Cinema.
And we did a special introduction where we said, congratulations, you are in the movie. Please enjoy. Kylie Minogue, this was always like Stock Aitken and Waterman, like, who produced these Kylie tracks. These were considered, the Hit Factory was considered very cheesy in the 80s, but I think we can go on record saying that, A, we love Kylie Minogue, but we particularly love this song.
This is a guilty pleasure that is no longer guilty for me. It's got a fantastic opening. I mean, the trumpets are a little sort of dated a little bit, but it's a great dance track. And also it's called Step Back in Time. You know, the whole point of this moment is that they're literally, it's a moment of group regression, which those school discos were, is this idea of pretending to be kids again. It's very sinister, I think. It's a bit weird.
No, I mean, school discos. I think they sort of do it in the US a little bit, but it's a kind of a British thing. It's like like a club night called school disco, but it is you know, like It does seem a little bit creepy, just an excuse to... It's really just an excuse to get, like, older women to dress up as schoolgirls, basically.
Exactly, which is a very dubious male fantasy.
Yeah.
Which we played out.
We have never, ever thought about that, ever.
In fact, we actually changed the lines here. It says, I think initially it said they look so young instead of they look good, and it just felt a bit creepy that, you know, essentially Gary, Peter and Andy were about to make out with 17-year-old girls.
Now, there's a like, sort of, I think I mentioned this on the other commentary, but, like, they're all brunettes in the background. Everybody in the school disco is a brunette to make the marmalade sandwich, and Sam, in fact, really stand out. Now, if you're watching, like, once you've, like, seen the movie a couple of times, watch it one time and just watch Martin Freeman, because, like, his facial reactions, especially coming out, are really amazing. But if you notice, like I said throughout, is that from this point, like, Martin Freeman's Bluetooth is bleeping the whole time. Like, he's getting information.
He's receiving data from the network. Also, you know, David Bradley there mentions the shooting star, and if you go back to the prologue, when Thomas, young Gary, is sitting looking out at Newton Haven, a shooting star streaks across the sky because we love the idea that that night actually was very significant, even though Gary's, you know, the significance Gary places on it is different. It was the night that they arrived, and so Gary's insistence that that night meant everything actually turns out to be true.
People got a lot friendlier.
This was...
I love this man.
Some people have asked us if he's called Basil because he's Basil Exposition, which is very much unintentional.
His little cough. I think Kevin Eldon emailed me about that. He loved that little cough.
Oh, really? Did he?
Yeah.
Did he? Was he at the premiere, Kevin?
No, I don't think he was.
Oh, he saw it, but he liked that cough.
I think it was Kevin.
It's kind of the thing that Kevin Eldon would do. David Bradley is so amazing.
Obviously, in a film of this type, when you have quite a complex sort of mythology behind it, you do have to take time occasionally to explain it, and this felt like a very
fun way of doing
it. Of having a character whose specific function is to expound what is going on, and a guy who's been accused of sort of ridiculous theories and ideas and stories is telling the story of our film, which is essentially ridiculous.
But not just that, also the nice thing is to take a big exposition scene and illustrate it with the marmalade sandwich. So it's kind of like taking something that's very talky but making it extremely visual with the girls and all of the colours and music.
Absolutely.
Don't ask me what happens to them.
Why, what happens to the empties?
I should point out that Saint Etienne, Join Our Club is obviously something that's, you know, like using song titles that are completely on the nose.
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot of that. I think, in fact, Basil at one point said, unless you join their club.
It says join our club.
He changed it to join us, and I think, in the end.
This just can't be good.
Sam, who was the boy that you liked?
A lot of people copped off with each other on this day, not least us and the Marmalade
You
Sandwich.
did a lot of snogging.
Listen, if it was called upon me to do, I had to do it. I love the way the crowd parts here. That is hilarious. Look at Martin.
Martin, look at Martin Freeman's face. Look at Martin Freeman's face. Now, this is Bill Nighy's voice. I asked James, the actor who plays Adrian Keene, I said, would you mind if Bill Nighy revoiced you, because we want to kind of... And actually, Bill Nighy starts to revoice everybody at the end.
You can see the blanks starting to cop them. Look, so they're starting to turn to see what's going on. They realise that they're not buying it.
I love this creepy kind of background work of people looking around. Is very much inspired by Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake. Which
a lot of those people were real as well, because they were shooting in streets, weren't they? And people were genuinely stopping to look.
Oh, in the Body Snatchers one. I mean, in this, they're all our extras.
You'll notice that Tracy Benson, who Rose Reynolds plays, who's my Marmalade Sandwich member, is chewing all the time in the... When Gary comes out of the club, he's chewing her gum.
Yeah, you've taken her gum away.
Yeah. Which actually got punched out of Gary's mouth in a subsequent scene, but we lost that moment in the fight, and I don't think you saw it anyway. It was very quick. But Gary's appearance was always, we always liked the idea of Gary's appearance gradually breaking down into this bizarre sort of like
a clown.
Yeah, like a sad clown.
Yeah, he has literally like the tears of the clown at the end. You know. Yeah, he's got the sort of like the blue. Now he's got the lipstick. He's looking like a sad clown.
We could end up dead in the field.
This was Martin's last night before he went off to do Hobbit Press, and the weather was so erratic that we shot all these reverses, but basically in different states of weather.
I was going to say as well, going back to the blue and green, not just the cars, but all of the recycling bins are all blue and green. And
they have
the
idea
idea
is that
there's... Well, we like the idea that maybe the dead humans end up in the recycling bins, you know, like the mulch, because there's... there are so many of them, and from this point on in the movie, you just see more and more and more of these recycling bins.
Yeah.
So keep your eye out for blue and green sort of signifiers in the background. If you look right in the background, you can see all the blanks walking down the street, and they're all walking in time, which I think is really creepy.
This is actually a Thai restaurant which was just down from the Broadway cinema, which we turned into the Beehive, so that the geography of the crawl could remain consistent.
Yeah, you can see the cinema in the background.
Or AKA the Mermaid.
And then the Beehive is called the Beehive because?
Because it is a kind of hive of activity. A lot of the blanks have congregated here, not least an arguable queen bee. Not to call Pierce Brosnan a queen, that's ridiculous.
Pierce Brosnan is reading
the opposite of it.
Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Brave New World, which is a nice little detail.
Let's have a little chat about your future.
Pierce Brosnan, it has to be said, we always kind of wanted someone with great authority to play this role. Pierce was in town, and it seemed a possibility. We couldn't believe that it was a possibility, but it was. And
the funny
tell the
thing
story about his voice.
You a robot?
Oh yeah, there was this funny thing when I was trying to get Pierce to do the role, and he was very up for it, but I was explaining it to him. I sort of said, you know, in the opening sequence, we sort of see you, but we're not sure it is you, and then later on when we hear you, we go, oh my God, it's Pierce Brosnan, you know, when we hear your voice. And Pierce Brosnan said, but Edgar, do you think I have that distinctive a voice? I think you do, Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, you do.
I think your voice is very distinctive.
He was an absolute trooper, a genuine professional, and a lovely, lovely man, and I consider it a huge privilege to have got to work with him. And not least another Bond as well, after the great Timothy Dalton as well.
We've created a continuity problem, though, is that there is no Bond in Shaun of the Dead, and the only way that we can have a Bond in Shaun of the Dead is that if one of the actors in Shaun of the Dead becomes Bond. Who's it going to be?
Funnily enough, my agent called yesterday and said, I'm sorry, Nick's got it.
Oh. So
it's Nick Frost will be 007.
So,
now, Pierce Brosnan is essentially playing my old drama teacher, Mr. Wilde, who is in Hot Fuzz.
Yes, Mr. Wilde, who's also...
Peter Wilde. Let's give him his full name.
Peter Wilde.
Mr. Wilde.
A recurring figure and a very significant one for you, because he always comes up.
I know.
So clearly...
He's like a very dear friend.
Well, he used to be in your films as well,
He is extremely flattered. Like, he saw the movie and he was extremely... He actually said, he goes, I didn't usse to take my glasses off like that, did I? I said, yes, you did. So you exactly did that. There's the birthmark.
Now, there's Oliver's 6, which was his birthmark, which is how Andy knows that he's changed into a blank.
Here we go.
Why he does this.
Boom! There goes the head.
Andy.
I love that effect. I love it. It creeps me out.
That part of that was an animatronic. Some of the animatronic, all of the animatronic work in this movie was instantly impressive on the day.
Matt Denton and Waldo Mason responsible for the animatronics.
Stuff. The dismembered arms, Greg Townley's head, a Martin puppet, wonderful.
Now, the other thing, I mentioned the Stepford Wives poster, the other poster that factors into the idea of the blanks, amongst many other things, it was that Drew Struzman's poster for The Thing, another image that does not feature in the movie, has that great Drew Struzman poster where it's like a man with a light for a head, which isn't in John Carpenter's The Thing, but I thought was a great image.
This was an incredible fight. I mean, we kind of wrote the whole notion of Andy using the Hulk hand bar stools and Gary holding onto his pint, but in the writing process of this, which was obviously involved Brad and Damien, I mean, it's so inventive and it was such fun to shoot, and it gives me chills when I watch this. I get so excited.
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar thing to The Bathroom, is that what we'd written out is the basic beats, and then it's about kind of giving everybody hero moments and stories. So I would go through it with Brad and Damien and say, well, Simon's story is that, like, you know, he's trying to keep his pint and, like, not split his pint. He's going to fight one-handed. You know, Eddie has to be saved. Eddie does not land a punch until Shane Hawkins. It's important that Eddie doesn't actually land a single punch.
And all of his frustration comes out then.
Yeah.
That was interesting. Nadia, the stunt performer who was on top of Eddie, that's a physical hand and a digital head.
Yeah.
The combination of digital and physical effects enabled us to do a lot of this stuff, which is...
Yeah,
like he's missing an eye. That wasn't there on the day.
Nadia is an amputee stunt woman.
Yeah. We worked with amputee stunt performers in Shaun of the Dead and this, and had a few of them back. Tim Bagley, who played the groom zombie in Shaun of the Dead, was back as one of the bar staff in this film.
Yeah, he's the barman in the Cross Hands, and he crops up in the last sort of fight scene.
I tear his arm off. Again.
This is Matt Harris, one of our dance captains who worked with Litzer, our choreographer. Now here's the Twist the Melon from Happy Mondays.
Yeah, this is a line from Step On.
Twist the melon, man.
There you go.
And that's James Harris, one of our key stunt coordinators.
James Harris was in the Ant-Man suit in my Ant-Man test.
Yeah. Another wonderful moment of Martin.
Now, what's amazing is, what is so great is that you know it's Martin Freeman even without the eyes.
Yeah.
Is that sort of like, Martin's got, you know, the eyes are your most expressive kind of like element of your face, and yet it's like...
It's a testament to Martin's ability as an actor that he can still be brilliant with just a mouth.
we call that the half Bilbo.
I really like the idea that Gary calls him "Oh man" as well there when he jumps across the bar. Boom! The stomach hit.
Pierce had an alternative line here that he had that was like he said, "Andy, put the leg down."
Yeah.
And I wavered between like different versions of it, but eventually I went with like the classic teacher line of going, "Okay, break it up."
Yeah, yeah.
Now the Pierce is saying, it's not about, you know, like I wish you could see the light because the light is going to be the network at the end.
Absolutely, yeah. The light.
If only you'd see the light, sort of saying like, we want you to kind of just come into the fold, basically. I mean, why he's called Mr. Shepherd is he's trying to get the gang to join the network. He is their shepherd. In fact, originally his name was Mr. Wild, and we changed it to Mr. Shepherd. It's like, that's what he's trying to do, is shepherd them into the network.
He should have a literal name like the others.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we wanted the network to be a fairly benevolent organization, and they were at pains to try not to replace everybody. They didn't want to replace everybody on Earth. They wanted humans to remain, but they just needed to do it by persuasion. And I think it's like with Gary, it's like, we got to get this one guy. We have to just at least get him. And that's why they don't just immediately replace him, because bless them, they're still trying to do it. They're still trying to do the right thing, which is what we wanted the network to be ambiguous in their intentions.
Yeah, we like the idea that they actually try and do a one-on-one induction with like Gary. It's like, if we just can convince Gary King, then the others will
We could
fall
maybe
in.
get the whole human race.
Absolutely, yeah. If we can convince this sort of like aging rebel, then we can get anybody. It's worth pointing out back there was Patricia Franklin, who has appeared in all 3 movies.
Yes, as the porn star in
Sean,
in the pub,
and the newsagent lady in Hot Fuzz.
Are you sure?
Now here's another scene where I feel Gary starts to open up because he's on his own with somebody. Like when it's just like either on his own or with one other person, he starts to kind of like maybe admit some truths.
He admits that Stephen is a better man than he is,
Yeah.
which he would never do in company.
He would never say in front of Stephen.
Certainly not. I mean, it's something that he kind of like, he suppresses Stephen at all times. But it's kind of, you know, Sam sees into his soul, and Andy sees into his soul. They all would, I think, one-on-one in certain situations, but he's better against the group. And it's interesting, there are 3 interventions in this movie. There's the first one we see him in, the one in the cross hands, and then finally we'll soon get to the 3rd one.
I mean, and what's interesting here is that you basically say everything about the film is like, when people say, what's the film about? Is like, I say, well, Rosamund Pike says you got to go forwards and not backwards. That's what the movie's about.
Yeah, and there's another nice callback later on in that the next time we see Roz, the way they have to escape is backwards.
Yes.
Now, we actually didn't write the fence gag in the original script.
We did, but we didn't shoot it.
That's right, yeah, but not as it stands. We
the
wrote a
fence
kind
gag
of
was
version
different.
of it. It was like a sort of undercutting of the fence gag, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
which I think was too subtle. We wrote this fence gag originally in the script. The idea was that it happened off camera and you heard it but didn't see it, and then the camera panned around and you saw the aftermath. But when it came to that night, we ran out of time and didn't shoot it at all. And then we did some pickups, like maybe about 8 weeks after we wrapped, and the fence gag is one of them. So it was kind of funny that it went straight into the trailer because it's like we'd shot it like very recently.
Absolutely, and I think it was worth waiting to get it right because it's an important connecting factor of the 3 films, and I'm glad we didn't I'm glad we didn't shy away from it.
Now, in the prologue, they say, like, sort of at the Bowls Club, this is when it all went fuck up.
Fuck up.
And everybody got para. Like, and this is everybody getting para, like, sort of, you know.
Everyone's getting paranoid. I remember Paddy, when we shot this, said, who's going to watch fucking 8 minutes of acting?
We shot all of this scene in one day. This is one of the ways that we managed to kind of get more time to do the fight scenes, is like, okay, with a really intense, like, argument scene like this, we got to shoot it in one day. But I think this was like, the performances in this scene are really great from all of you. Well, maybe not Simon. I'm kidding.
It was like doing a little sort of like four-hander in a studio space theatre, you know.
What does that prove?
And also it enables us to also give over a little more exposition about, you know,
He was new, like a baby.
about the blanks.
Like a maybe.
Maybe.
That always gets a big laugh. I remember, I have to give you credit, I was unsure about the maybe line, and I remember keep sort of trying to go, I don't know, and it gets such a big laugh. So I
am right sometimes.
Listen, sometimes Simon Pegg is right. Like, even a broken peg is right twice a day.
I think I remember swapping
Paddy's
the
arse?
show us your bum. It was originally show us your ass because I said the thing went up your bum and it was funny to say show us your bum, so we swapped arse and bum there. Little things make big differences.
Now,
Eddie's performance here is very funny.
Some of these injuries are from, like, sort of, some of these injuries are real, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I did stab Nick in the hand once. We weren't playing the knife game. I stabbed him on the set of Space by accident. I did run over my friend. No, I lost control of my friend's Suzuki moped. I didn't run over his leg, though.
Almost severing my femoral.
But you never, like, shoved a broken bottle up somebody's ass.
Well, I'm not at liberty to say it until the proceedings have completed. The big reveal of Andy and Gary's awful incident was something we kind of didn't want to make too much of. And this was a nice way to have it and
explained
finish.
and yet thrown away at the same time.
There's my sister's tattoo.
Yeah. Show us your.
I thought you would be super method to get that tattoo done for real and have kept it ever since.
I was super method to get those abs.
Tell us about your abs.
Oh, man, they're gorgeous.
I have this theory that, like, you got completely ripped up in between Mission Impossible 3 and 4 because you saw yourself on screen opposite zero body fat Tom Cruise. And then when you came back in Mission Impossible 4, you were super ripped.
Yeah, so I was a fat little blob in Mission Impossible 3. That's not Benji done.
Yeah, like Benji hit the gym in between 3 and 4.
That looks like a potato. Well, he did become an agent, so...
Oh, there you go.
I guess he had to.
He was told to.
Yeah, shape up, you fat little bastard. That's essentially what Tom and Brad Bird said to me when I went for my first meeting. Not true. So here we go with... This was always a
Nicholas
kind of...
got Millenor in his hand.
This was one of our very first ideas before we wrote the body of the film, was this scene with Gary proving that he was human by battering himself around the head.
Yeah,
and
the fact that you've seen how easily the blanks' heads break is like this. I think this is a couple of takes strung together. We made it go on as long as we possibly could.
That noise is fabulous.
Exactly.
Ow!
Also a little throwback there to the scene in Shaun of the Dead when he hits himself on the head with a cricket bat.
For some reason, the headbutting of the post makes me think of a comedian that we love dearly, Rick Mail.
Ah, I love him.
We do. We're big Young Ones fans.
Huge influence on us, I think.
Gary, what do you mean nobody's inside? And we can still do this. Do what exactly? Oh, we're still on the crawl!
This point in the movie is where, like, Gary is, like, sort of leading them down very dark alleys in terms of, like, he does not have this... he's never had...
Their best interests
at heart. But at this point, they're starting to... They're realizing that... They're starting to realize that he is using the danger as an ulterior motive to actually drink.
Felt so terribly ashamed by what I'd
We wrote Peter to be the kind of meek one of the group and the sort of most sympathetic one in some degree, but I think a lot of that in the final analysis is down to Eddie's brilliant performance. People really warm to Peter, and I think makes this moment all the more tragic.
I think people find Peter's death very upsetting because they don't want Eddie to disappear from the picture.
I think so, and I also kind of think, you know, the three boys here, considering they just took on like 30-odd blanks in the beehive, they should have gone and helped him, but...
Well...
It's too late, and he pays the price in a way for sinking to the bully's level, you know,
We also sort of said he pays the price for being juvenile. It's actually he gets killed for sort of
For laughing at a gay joke.
Yeah, for laughing at a gay joke. That was the thing, it's quite moralistic in a way. It's like, as soon as Eddie starts sniggering like a little kid at a gay joke, he's dead. You know, it's like, that's the thing, is when people become kind of like sort of show fallibility, they're out, you know?
Yeah.
I do like the line, I'll punch their fucking lights out.
Yeah, that's funny. It's a nice little gag. It's funny, like in 80s films, you used to get killed for having sex and taking drugs, and now you get killed for being on PC.
Yes, absolutely.
Times are changing.
What does Martin get killed for, though? Being a lightweight.
Being an estate agent.
We gotta go. Gary's right. We gotta get to the King's Head. Exactly.
What? No, we should have said the... oh, no, we did mention the beehive in terms of its name and...
Yeah, we haven't missed any of the pubs,
King's Head, which is coming up, is literally the Gary's mind. I mean, that's kind of... which we'll talk about when we get there.
Now you can either come with us willingly.
Oh, you watch in this shot coming up in a second, actually, you'll see in the car park, you can see they're only Ampere's blue and green, but also you can see the network symbol like on the background on these like
even their
banners.
manifesto is up there.
Where does it say we build, we improve, we perfect? But you can see the network symbol there,
which is what they do across the whole galaxy. We had this idea that what the network is a force of sort of brand recognition. They change every planet into something which is in keeping with their ideas, and so you have essentially a. We initially called it a Facebook in space, didn't we? It was like an organization that lots of planets were members of willingly.
I don't know, but it's definitely not.
In space, no one can hear you poke. Now, let's talk about this statue, because this was something that was, I think this happens kind of everywhere, but there's definitely like sort of the idea of modern like art in like sort of small
odd,
towns.
nondescript, sort of soulless art.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to, imply some kind of cultural.
It was one of the
awareness.
first ideas. I think isn't there like a weird
That's me in the King's Head, as you can see.
Isn't in Swindon there like some weird sculpture in the middle? I mean, most towns have some kind of weird sculpture
These
now.
post kind of Henry Moore type
Yes.
shapes, which struggle to sort of convey any meaning.
And always looks sinister.
Yeah.
There's the fruit machine.
That's the
making
fruit
its
machine.
third appearance in the trilogy.
Which was another late addition of yours. You just remembered it in the last moment in the sound edit, right?
Absolutely, I forget a way to put it.
Here's a very poignant moment, I think, with Gary, in that this pub's called the King's Head because it's where Gary makes the decision to
carry on without them.
It's
almost like he's actually like speaking an interior monologue aloud. That's what I think is in this bit. He's kind of talking to himself. He's not really talking to the others. He's actually just going through it in terms of like, two of us are dead and I'm going to toast them, but I am also going to go.
Yeah.
You could also say the King's Head is on his beer right there.
Yeah. There it is.
There's the King's Head.
And also, Gary never. We had this idea that Gary really never planned to come back from this night. It was
he's
he
not
never had
thinking
any,
about tomorrow.
He never had any plans for the next day, and so, his planning is so short term that all he's thinking about is his next drink.
And this is the first time he's had to cross off the 10th pub
in blue pen.
Yes, exactly. Something here like, as well. I think like this way. I think is very emotional. Is the idea that. The final set piece is not them running away from the aliens, it's that Nick, his oldest friend, Andy rather, his oldest friend, is running to save him from himself.
Broke my finger there.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I broke my hand actually, jumping the bar, I caught my finger and it snapped back, bone in the back of my hand.
But I think this is powerful in terms of Andy is running to like rescue you.
Yeah, despite the that's why I kind of like the enemy, and they're similar to the zombies in a way. I always kind of see the blanks as being, what we did with the blanks was create a synthesis of the zombies and the NWA, in that they were a kind of large homogenizing force of change. So you have the, and also you can be among them, you can see them and get to know them. It's the problem I have with the whole notion of the running zombies, that you never get to know them like you do, and we kind of wanted to be among the blanks.
There's Tim Bagley, the publican from the Cross Hands, is in the background there. He's the one who gets his arm ripped off. It's the same guy who plays the groom in Shaun of the Dead.
That's right. That's Letchworth Station there, which we dressed up as a pub.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, the blanks also, they are like, Gary is afraid of getting older and being part of the system, and the blanks are like, his fear of growing up manifested.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I like that, Stephen seemingly is gone at this point. Stephen's like, sort of like, fucking, I'm out of here, and like, Andy is running to save him from himself.
Stephen has a Han Solo moment in a pub called The Hole in the Wall by creating
a hole in the wall.
He drives the beast through the wall of the pub. Another last-minute moment of Brad Allen beauty.
Yeah, this umbrella fight was not in the script. There was like a tiny bit of storyboarding, which then in Brad and Damien's hands becomes sort of like twice as long.
Very classic sort of Jackie Chan style as well. They're fighting with props, which is obviously a sign of Brad's involvement with Jackie's team.
We love any prop-heavy prop foo.
Get the fuck in! We haven't much time!
We like the idea that Stephen is a hero and a romantic lead. He's kind of, for all Gary's talk of rivalry, Stephen really was, after all, he was the romantic lead that he always wanted to be, which was important. And Paddy plays that beautifully because he's so good looking.
But there's also a sweet thing about old friends in terms of like, no matter what bad things have happened, is that they're always trying to save when it really comes down to it, they have to like help each other, or they try to help. Both Andy and like Stephen are trying to help Gary. This is interesting, actually. Like, in the first draft of the script, like, Nick kissed Becky Salthair and then, like, threw her down. And then, actually, Rachel Pryor, who works at Big Talk on our development, says, I don't like Andy kissing her like he's married. It makes me like Andy less. And so then we came up with the wedding ring idea instead.
And that's because Nick had suggested that Andy be estranged from his wife, and which kind of explains why he comes along in the first place, which is a great note from Nick that we took on board.
Yeah, it was like one note from Nick that then like majorly changed the film is that there's a twist to like Nick's character is that he's actually
that bit of score there. Sorry.
Oh, it's beautiful. Now, what's funny, we did this Q&A, you weren't there actually, and a few people have said this sometimes, I can't believe you don't let him have that last beer. And I say, like, he can't have that last beer, like, you know, like, Andy is trying to save him from himself.
You shouldn't be supporting. I remember we had a great conversation. Harry Knowles from Ain't It Cool News was kind of doing this math that maybe Gary had 12 pints because there was more than a pint outside the famous cock. Like, he was trying to rationalise.
The fool's gold.
Which is kind of funny. I like that.
Now we always wanted it to be like a sort of almost like a Waiting for Godot type thing, where you know you never meet Godot. Is that he never gets a drink in the World's End.
Yeah.
You know, and even when he pulls the pump in a second, something else happens.
This was a significant moment for us in terms of my relationship with Nick in all the other films, in that we'd never seen us fight, you know, and it's quite a big deal when you watch it in terms of all three films, that this is Nick and me in physical combat. And you know, a lot of people have said, oh, I don't like seeing you and Nick fight, or they cry at this bit, which is a nice thing because it's the previous films that have set that up in a weird way. So that's how it works as a piece.
It's funny actually that this year, did you see Before Midnight?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm desperate to see it.
It's really good, but one of the things that's quite upsetting about it is that seeing them fight is like, oh, I don't want to see Mum and Dad fight.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this in a weird way. It's like sort of the third one is kind of actually sort of like,
more bittersweet.
A bit more upsetting because it's like, oh, it's realistic because people like argue and fight. But I mean, I think you two do an amazing job in this scene. Now, what's ironic is that on his kind of tag there it says King Gary.
Yeah. And this is the big reveal of the truth of Gary, that he you know, where we see him at the beginning is even more dire straits than we imagined, because he's just tried to kill himself at some point, which is kind of, you know, we never wanted to shirk away from that idea that our sort of silly comic force of chaos is actually a deeply wounded character.
Now, what's funny, in a few reviews, people have sort of said that he's in Alcoholics Anonymous at the start, but as you see on the tag, he's in a psychiatric hospital.
He's in like a sort of rehab facility, so I think he's at the end of his tether, you know, and he sees the World's End or completing the pub crawl as a way of...
But he's not in there voluntarily.
No, he's been committed. But the idea is he's escaped from it in order to do this. He thinks in his mind if he gets to the World's End, he'll solve all the problems in his life, when that's clearly not true.
I think that's sort of very, you know, there's also like supposed to be very loaded the fact that he said, you know, that night there was so much optimism, the feeling that we could take on the whole universe.
Yeah, which is what they do.
Which he's about to do in about 3 minutes, is take on the entire universe. We always thought this is like, you know, when he finally pulls that 12th pint, it's like, it's the trick pint.
Yeah. It's interesting when you write, you know, the pub disappears into a sinkhole and then you step onto a set that's been built to facilitate that line. I'm always impressed and amazed by the people we work with in terms of our production design. Every facet of the production are always, you know, unsung heroes, all of whom just are utterly on their game.
Well, let's sing about them. Marcus Rowlands, Fraser Churchill, Oscar Wright, like sort of just all these people who kind of came up with the...
Yeah, Matt and Waldo and...
Well, what's great is that this is a location, but like sort of between Marcus Rowlands and like Double Negative, they extended this kind of set. You actually see the pods, like in every other like chamber, you see the pods where the blanks are supposed to be made.
Worth mentioning, behind Gary and Andy there are hog lumps, the pork snack from Shaun of the Dead.
Also worth mentioning is on the right there is a real bitter called Doom Bar, which is a sort of,
right.
Which is I think a Cornish.
I think
bitter.
It is, yeah. The only
funny, Mark Commode is the first person who mentioned it. Yes, I love the fact that in the World's End, there's Doom Bar is in, you know, because that bar is descending into their certain doom. That's a real ale. And when I saw that, I said to Marcus Rowland, said, Doom Bar has to be in the World's End on the bar that goes down into hell. Now, in a way, there's definitely, this is supposed to be cyclical in terms of like, at the start of the film, Gary is in a circle of like help.
Yeah.
And now he's back in a circle of help. You
But
know?
it's a interstellar intervention that he's experiencing there. A cosmic intervention.
A small sacrifice.
But they are, you know, like in terms of like, you know, Bill Nye appearing as the network, the first thing he says is, "We want to help you, Gary."
Yeah, absolutely.
They do think that they don't see themselves as sinister, do they? The network.
No, absolutely.
For those who willingly.
Also, there's this whole notion in addiction therapy of the higher power. You know,
Something you'd like?
the force that you give yourself over to save yourself from yourself, and that is essentially what the network is. It's a higher power.
Now, we thought that Sisters of Mercy here, this is playing This Corrosion, the intro. I thought that this is not score. They're actually playing this into
the room.
Into the room. No, they're playing it into the room
that.
because they're playing it into the room because they want Gary King to hear it because they want him to be in his young body.
Allow me to carry your legend forward.
Now, what is Gary doing here? He's killing himself.
He's literally killing himself. It's something that he's done before, attempted to do, and now he succeeds. He tears his own head off.
But this is one of the first progressive things that he does. This is the road to recovery.
Yeah, he rejects his youth. Literally rejects his youth.
Yeah, he has the chance to be 18 again, which is what he's always wanted, and he doesn't take it. Now, it's worth pointing out that the light itself is supposed to be like cell phone mobile reception bars.
Yeah, two facing each other, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like
two. Like we just thought if to make this idea that like the network controls all information technology, that it would be the sort of the reception bars on like a smartphone.
I just noticed Andy laughs at Gary then when he says no. When he's just being pig ignorant. We did a screening for Apple employees in Cupertino and near San Francisco, and sort of like suddenly realized that we'd essentially attributed all of recent computer breakthroughs to aliens. I think they were flattered.
Therein lies the necessity.
But you know, it's actually the dock around is hexagons. That's like bringing it back to the beehive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we went back to this idea of making it seem like a hive mind. My brother like sort of designed all of the dock and the light itself. But what's funny is that there's that Doctor Who episode, The Terror of the Autons.
Yes.
Like, and the Autons is another like inspiration for the Blacks. Is that like I think it's Nestor is the name. The Nestine is the name of the alien attention, and that was all hexagons. So that was kind of a coincidence. But when I rewatched Terror of the Autons, it's like, oh yeah,
it was probably in the back of your mind, or back of Oscar's mind, maybe.
Your planet is the least civilized in the entire.
The idea here that Andy is the first person to criticize Gary, but also the first person to defend him.
Yeah.
And when an outside force comes in and starts talking, you know, shit to him, Andy steps up to be his lawyer here. He's essentially, we wanted this to be like a court scene.
Yeah, we wanted this to be like a court scene. We sort of described this scene as like Mr. Smith goes to Washington, like he starts filibustering basically, doesn't he?
Speak for all humanity. You are but two men.
You notice that the light changes in different moods. We had like 4 different shapes for different emotions from the light.
Yeah.
It gets angry, it gets defensive. That's angry. And then it gets defensive, it goes all thin.
Trouble now. It's only the fun.
And
I
here's
like
the
the
Three
fact-
Musketeers.
The Three Musketeers, and 2 have died, and you have 3 left, which is exactly what Gary says in the car before they set off for Newton Haven.
And they've broken out of their Osgap as well.
And also the whole idea that goes throughout the film of arguing with drunk people is pointless. You know, this comes to a head here utterly because, you know, there's this super intergalactic hyper-intelligence having difficulty reasoning with 3 drunk human beings, which we thought was very funny.
I like the idea that Basil thinks I should probably go along, so I kind of like just try and blend in.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's hiding at the back.
He has to attend the AGM, otherwise he forfeits his subs.
I like that Reece Shearsmith and Nicholas Burns are the only 2 weasels that have stayed human just by being kind of like
conformist.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't really want to prescribe any meaning in this film or any kind of answer to the notion of whether conforming is a good or a bad thing, or whether the network is a force of good or a force of evil, or whether free will is more important than anything else. Maybe it isn't. Maybe free will is the cause of all the hardships in the world. Maybe we do need to be led, or, you know, I hesitate to say control, but certainly kind of helped.
Well, you know, the reality is we live somewhere in the happy middle, but in this movie that, you know, as a satire, you got to draw a sharp line in the sand and said, okay, do you want to be with them, or do you want to be with the drunk humans? You got to be with the drunk humans.
Well, we also shape it so that you have to side with, you know, Gary is a very unsympathetic character in the outset, but by the end of it, we want you to be on his side, and we set ourselves a challenge to get to that point, you know.
Yeah, exactly. To be flawed is to be human. So, like, we've set up this character as being like somebody who is like deeply like sort of troubled and damaged, and yet maybe he is the most human person.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe he's fundamentally the, you know, what being a human is all about.
Well, there's that bit earlier on that it sort of says, the idea is that when Gary mishears the Gary, king of the humans, is the network puts the like punctuation in the wrong place.
And it puffs him up.
It puffs him up. He kind of like thinks he's now representing the entire human race.
It's amazing. You take away the comma and it's Gary, king of the humans.
Yeah.
It's pointless arguing with you. You will be left to your own devices.
I like the way it's gone all meek and thin there and all the hexagons go out.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Now, explain we like the idea that now, like, the humans may have infected the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah, the fuck it line actually came in quite late. When we were in the room with Bill, we said, say fuck it, because we like this idea that humanity is such a sort of pervasive force that it started to leak into the network. So when the network retreat and go off to wherever they are, all the other planets start to get infected by humanity, and the whole galaxy goes to shit.
I should point out that dialogue that's at the start of Loaded, we want to be free to do what we want to do, is a sample that's on Primal Scream's Loaded, but it's from like Roger Corman's Wild Angels, and it's spoken by Peter Fonda. And Peter Fonda obviously is like the ultimate rebel, so it kind of makes total sense for Gary King to be like speaking like dialogue that Peter Fonda, like Captain America himself, you know, like actually like would have said.
I think, you know, we had this idea that Gary's favorite songs are like his credo, they're his anthems, his hymns, you know, the things that he lives his life by.
Thanks a bunch.
You know, free to do what you want to do.
I'm free to,
do it at any old time, you know.
Buzzer, what do we do now?
These songs kind of shape who he is, and that's why the soundtrack to this film was very important to us, and we wrote it into the script. We wrote a lot of the tracks that you hear were written for the moments that they appear in. We didn't obviously put that into the main script so that music publishing didn't charge us an arm and a leg.
You know, the Loaded, we did write into the main script.
We did actually, that's true, because we wrote lines from it.
But here, they have obviously finally reached the world's end. They've also like painted the town red. Now.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most obvious tarot card in the set.
This is a payoff to the earlier line about Sam getting lost on the ring road.
Yes.
Martin sort of says, "Oh, did you get lost on the ring road again?" Very easy to get lost on ring roads in a town you don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Even Oxford is hard to, you know, you sort of get lost all the way around.
I grew up near Bournemouth, and Bournemouth and Poole, where I kind of essentially grew up, like when I was young, is all ring roads.
Now there's Gary screaming backwards when Sam told him not a few hours before, even less, that you have to go forwards, not backwards. The irony being that they escape backwards at first. Now, we wrote this into the script as being a plasma wave, and that's exactly what our effects team came up with.
Yeah, we want it to be, it's not kind of like a nuclear blast, it's like a sort of an energy blast that's knocking out all the electricity and starting fires.
Yeah, it's like, the whole idea was they didn't really want to destroy the human race, they just wanted to
take away disable all electricity, all technology.
I consider it to be, it means something to me that Edgar and I both were at the premiere of Akira in Bristol in 1989, and we didn't know we didn't realize we were both there until years later. But this effect is very reminiscent of Akira.
Absolutely.
The sort of ever-expanding semicircle.
It also reminds me of like a gamma blast in like Todd McFarlane's Hulk series from like sort of the late 80s. I remember particularly like a frame of a gamma blast that was similar to that.
Now here we are at the style that we see at the beginning of the end of the prologue pub crawl.
Yeah.
This is the point on the hill, and Gary actually even notices that they're there. You see that Edgar got me to do a little double take
of like, oh, I know where we are. We've come right back to the start of the movie.
We're back at the beginning. And it was, Edgar and I had to check ourselves throughout the whole writing process that Gary never apologized for anything during the film until this point. So
yeah.
even casually just say, oh, sorry about that. We had to...
He never says sorry until this moment.
He never says sorry until this moment. That's a nice image.
Yeah, that was, credit to Fraser Churchill. Like, what I had originally thought was it was just the valley was on fire. And I thought maybe that had been seen too much in recent movies, so, like, Fraser came up with the idea of doing this kind of like more Pompeii-ish,
yes,
like massive cloud.
Well, they did very nice Hollywood Hills on Fire, and This Is the End, didn't they?
Yeah, I actually showed Fraser the trailer of This Is the End and said, okay, do something completely different to this.
Yeah.
So that's where we came up with the sort of Pompeii. Originally, at one point, we had David Bowie's version of Alabama Song in there, which
that's right. Yeah,
which was it was written into the script, but it never quite worked. But
it was too flippant, I think. This moment is so kind of again like with Shaun of the Dead, we wrote the ending. There's the quote behind. We wrote the ending before we wrote the body of the film, and we always wanted to follow through with our promise of ending the world. We always wanted it to be this sort of strange, happy ending. And we would argue, as I'll hand over to Edgar to explain why, that this is probably the happiest ending of all three films, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so, because I think even though it takes like sort of a bleak, post-nuclear winter or post-Technogeddon winter to get there, everybody gets what they want. Oh, it's worth mentioning not only is Gary's mum dead, but Paul, who's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, like cousin Paul, is also dead.
Yeah.
So poor cousin Paul never got his money from Gary.
Which is probably a relief to Gary.
The world again. Everyone got cut off.
I have to go. Fraser Churchill came up with the idea of the bronze sculpture being a scarecrow.
How did it get there?
I think Andy dragged it. He towed it. Well, how did the Stonehenge stones get there?
There might have been there might have been those statues in every town. This is the thing. We don't know how far the network had actually gone.
I think he dragged it.
Here we go with a reference which we literally throw away.
Yeah.
We wanted people to think, oh, they've forgotten it.
At one point, we thought the cornetto wrapper should be the end shot of the film, but it was always supposed to be like, somebody actually said on Twitter, he goes, no, I was disappointed they didn't eat a cornetto. It's like, oh, grow up.
Oh, fuck off. I love that little bit of Martin's head caving in there. And
there's loads of people in this shot. Like, Mark Heap is in this shot.
Our Marmalades are in there.
Like, Greg is in there. There's all the guys without Gary.
We went back
crucially.
and picked up a little bit more of this, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we could see the young guys again before we see them with Gary, so that people could recognise them. That coin is digital, obviously. Very well done.
Now this is the point where the blanks are starting to rebel.
Yes.
Like Martin is giving. Now also Martin gives them the finger. Young Oliver gives them the finger in the opening sequence.
Well, it's this whole thing of the selective memory, the kind of idea that the humanity is impossible to suppress.
That was Rafe and Alice returning as the young couple. They're still looking for a house in the post-apocalypse.
I suppose he picked up where the
And this is like Eddie back back in the kitchen. This is the same kitchen from the opening sequence. But in the opening sequence, he's like being a terrible father and hiding behind the paper instead of like actually entertaining the kids.
Yeah, exactly. And here he's engaging, and it's still him. He's
better as a blank. He's like a sort of he's like a robot clown.
This design is beautiful. All the mobile phones hanging from the trees and stuff.
And there's and CDs hanging from the trees in the farm.
Steve and Sam's little shack.
No, this is crucial to me about the movie is that the opening sequence is Gary is narrating the prologue and is being wistful about 1990, and the others are not nostalgic at all. And then right at the very end, Andy is nostalgic for like 1990, and Andy admits to missing Gary. Gary will never know that Andy misses him, which I think is really sweet.
Yeah.
But then also Andy will never know about something that Gary's about to do, that Gary has taken some advice on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the idea that what Gary orders when he goes into the bar is water, because it suggests that it never really was about alcohol with Gary, even though it drove him and it become his anesthetic and his medication against his own depression. What you get is when he's finally together with his friends, when he finally has that little unit again, he can drink water because that's all he ever wanted was to be with his friends.
Not just that, also that he's...
Oh, there's Steph, Brad's missus.
Oh yeah, there's also like Kevin and Nick Wilson, the twins. There's also Mark Donovan, who plays the hulking zombie in Shaun of the Dead.
The film is bookended by Mary and the Hulk. There's my friend Tony Kirkland.
That's actually the Sisters of Mercy album on the wind-up gramophone.
Yeah.
That is actually Floodland.
We wanted to make sure that you could...
5 waters, please.
That we would justify the music playing, that it was a wind-up gramophone, not an electric one.
You actually see, like, there's numbers in all the pubs, even up to this point. There's a number 13 in this pub if you go looking for it.
Now, we actually reshot this sequence because we felt the ending needed a little something else, and I was in continuity for another film at this point, which is why we were going to have a fake beard for me, but we suddenly realised, we kind of thought, wouldn't it be great if Gary was clean-shaven, because it's like he's trying to be young again, or at least he's cleaned up a little bit.
Thomas is clean-shaven as young Gary, so why wouldn't he be clean-shaven? I mean, the other thing about this ending is that, like, as well as being with his young friends forever, he's also finally become the legend that he always thought he was. He has become King Gary, the leader of the Blanks.
Yeah, he's like, again, he's still on the outside. He's still on the outside. He's still on the fringes. You know, he's championing this now sort of subjugated race. And the fact is, you know, what the network said about humanity is kind of right, because they are intolerant, and they are, all the racism you see at the end, all the graffiti saying we are not robots and we are humans too, or whatever. You know, we had this idea that the network wasn't wrong to try and change the human race, because we are a little bit problematic as a species, you know.
And we have, like, sympathy for the Blanks because their dad eventually fucked off. Like, I'd like to imagine that maybe, like, Gary like has an absent father.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure that's part of his problem.
Howard Barker, the playwright, does a great speech in he played it called Victory about when a regime comes into place, it needs to be immediately, or when a regime is overthrown, the people that replace it need to be overthrown immediately, because otherwise they will just become the oppressors that will oppress them. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that Gary is now, he's evolving. He's staying on the right side all the time. He's always against the homogenizing force. So he is kind of a hero in the end, a mythic hero.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the idea, is that sort of like, by the end of the movie, Gary King has become King Gary.
King Gary, king of the humans.
Now, I felt like we just gave you a huge information bomb for the last 1 hour, 40 minutes, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, because we feel very pleased with ourselves.
Is there anything that we missed?
The DVD commentary is perhaps one of the most divine moments of sanctioned self-indulgence you could ever hope for. Because you don't have to listen to it, but we have a really good time making ourselves feel better about things.
It's funny, like, sort of, I also remember, like, a film that I really love called The Last of Sheila. Richard Benjamin does a commentary on it, and he says, now, there's something interesting going on in the background here, but I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it. I was thinking, Richard, they probably have seen, they should have seen the film before. Like, if you're watching the film with the commentary for the first time, you're doing it wrong.
It was interesting, we did a screening at the Brattle Theatre in Boston, which is a fantastic little sort of rep cinema in Boston, and we did a screening of all 3 films together, and there was someone in the audience who hadn't seen a single one of them. So her first experience of the sort of so-called Cornetto series was as a oner, which must have been quite an interesting cinematic experience.
Speaking of which, because people always ask us about it,
John Colley,
what links the Cornetto films? Because it is an unofficial trilogy. They are like 3 standalone films. So aside from cornettos and fence gags, the themes are Well,
there's obviously the theme about loss of identity in terms of a small, you know, like one person facing off against a collective, or 2 people, or a group of people against the entire galaxy. The notion of a protracted adolescence, friendship. Things such as, I mean, obviously things like the fence gag links it, the cornetto links it. What else have we got?
The Sound of the Fruit Machine.
The Sound of the Fruit Machine. There's also a film which takes a genre, an accepted genre, and uses it as a means of saying something else. It uses, you know, horror or action or science fiction as a metaphor to say more down-to-earth things, more human things.
We like the idea of them being Trojan horses. Somebody in a Q&A yesterday said to me, like, about Shaun of the Dead, said, oh, you know, it's a lot darker than the trailer. Like, why do you do that? And I say, well, it's difficult to kind of express all of the tones in the movie. And it'd be exactly the same with this in a trailer. And I said, we like to think of it as that we've given you a chocolate bar, but we forgot to tell you that it's dark chocolate with chili inside it.
Which is terrible if you're allergic to chili, because technically we could kill you.
Hey guys, like, I'm sorry if you don't like chili, I apologize, but like, if you like dark chocolate and chili, then I hope you enjoyed The World's End.
It's like giving someone a chocolate bar with peanuts in it without telling them, and that person not having an EpiPen on them.
Bill Hader is allergic to peanuts.
Please never give Bill Hader a peanut.
Please never give Bill Hader a peanut M&M.
You would endanger the life of one of our finest
We do not
minds.
want one of our best friends to go into anaphylactic shock.
That's a great name for the lead singer of a goth band.
Anaphylactic shock. Do you think maybe that's what Gary and Steve's band was really called?
Anaphylactic shock.
That's one thing I say is amazing is already the film's only been out for a month and already there are T-shirts for Gary King and the Enablers, Bermuda Rumblers and the
Aquanazis,
Aquanazis, and Old Nutball and the Shifty Twins. But maybe the name of their band back in sixth form, we're making it up as we go along now. Anaphylactic Shock.
Here's the auspicious list of music in the film.
I know, it's insane.
Which we were very lucky to get, considering, you know, you have to pay for all these tracks.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, a lot of amazing names on the thanks list.
Jackie Chan is thanks.
Jackie
Andrew
Chan.
Eldritch is thanks. Guillermo del Toro there. Kevin Eldon. Matilda Pegg.
The lovely Anna Kendrick. Quentin Tarantino. Guillermo del Toro.
There are always people that turn up in these thank you lists, and sometimes you think, I wonder why, but every single one of them, you know, there's a reason. And
hey, can I do a good segue here, Simon?
Please do.
I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for like watching the films, enjoying the films, and supporting us over the years, because we truly love you.
And I love you, Edgar. Thanks for writing this with me.
I love you too.